Good evening and welcome to Live United. Live United is an opportunity for us to highlight and share with you some of the different services, the volunteer opportunities, the advocacy going on here in the Monadnock region. Today I'm joined by Lori Tyler. Lori joins us from the Housing Stabilization Services provided through Southwestern Community Services. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I know you're a little nervous, Lori, so don't be anxious. This is a show where we're just going to dialogue a little bit. Do want to thank you for being here because housing stabilization is a very interesting topic, particularly in these economic times where people may be challenged with meeting some of those basic needs, which housing obviously is one of them. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of how Housing Stabilization Services started here in the Monadnock region?
I can do my best at that. I've been with Southwestern Community Services. I'll be in my 15th year next month. We started out, our program was named Homeless Services, and what we were doing in the beginning was just providing basic shelter for folks that were literally living on the streets or in their cars or wherever. And the first thing that we did was we put people in shelter. And it helped, it kept them warm, it kept them fed, but it didn't do much more than that. A few years ago, we changed our strategies, the way we do business. The first thing we don't do now is put people in shelter. We work with them while maybe they're staying with mom and dad or a friend or whatnot, because we find that we can help them progress into their own housing quicker. And it's a little bit more humane than putting 30 people in one building and trying to work with all 30 of them. So we changed the name from Homeless Services to Housing Stabilization Services because we want people to have stabilized housing. We concentrate mostly on preventing homelessness and rapid rehousing at this point. We also have a foreclosure department that helps counsels folks to not be foreclosed on, or a soft landing if there's no cure for the foreclosure.
So it sounds like there's a real focus on really not only sustainability for these people to be in stabilized housing, but also to really provide the educational services they may need to maintain their housing longer term and to ensure that they're going to be in a healthy environment.
That is true. We've actually added a component this year. It's housing counseling, housing stabilization counseling. We have someone that works with folks, renters or homeowners. They goes through their entire finances, finds out where there might be some gaps. We look for ways to increase revenue or decrease expenses. Lots of times people will, because they don't have the washer machine, they'll rent a washer machine, and folks donate items like that to us, and we have a storage place where we keep them, and we can eliminate that debt for someone by giving them that donated item, which helps their budget. They look at it, they feel empowered, they're like, oh my gosh, I'll have $30 left at the end of the month. Maybe I'll save 20 of it. And then they build their assets.
Well, the other nice thing about something like that is if they're renting from a rental location, they're usually paying quite a bit more for that item, and it may not be as long lasting as they hope. So it sounds like people have an opportunity, if they want to donate items to this program, they can do that. We'll come back to that in a little bit to really focus in on that and see how people can support Housing Stabilization Services. But I want to talk a little bit about the need. You talked about changing your response in the community. What led to that?
Because when people would enter the shelters, it's easy to get in, but difficult to get out. Once you're in the shelter, it seems like people were staying there longer and longer and longer. Our average length of stay 2 years ago was almost 100 days. Now we have dropped down to about 53 days is the average length of stay. And so that's one of our main outcomes, is to decrease the average length of stay at the shelter. And then the other one is to increase the number of folks leaving shelter, entering permanent housing, not just going from one shelter to another, or couch surfing, another term. We want people to get into their own permanent housing and start their own life.
What do you typically see as the profile of a person coming in? Do you have a typical profile, or could it be anyone?
There is no typical profile. It could be anyone. It could be because somebody was laid off. It could be because somebody had a major medical expense and lost their housing because they couldn't pay their rent. Medications, as we all know, are very expensive. It could be an elderly person living off their Social Security, which for some does not go very far. You really can't. I mean, most people right now, most people should be paying 30% of their income on housing. That's what it should be. People are paying 50% or more of their income on housing. You can't, if you're a single mom with 3 kids that have to go to childcare, it's impossible to continue paying your rent.
I know one of the things that you've been working on as part of your counseling piece is really how people can do the budget counseling and think about that ability to maintain their housing once they're in it. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're just beginning to do with some of that?
Sure. Well, like I said, we have the Housing Stabilization Counselor who goes through the entire finances with folks. And so what we're doing, we're trying to teach folks your housing is your priority. Always pay your rent or your mortgage first. You can't, you won't be able to use that TV if you're out on the streets, that kind of thing. So we try to teach people those basics. And then we are also trying to go beyond that. Responsible credit use, bank accounts, things like that, how to balance your checkbook. That doesn't seem to be taught anymore. And then the other thing is we talk to people about saving your money for that emergency so that you're not like borrowing from a payday loan type of place where your interest rate is 28, 38%. Just teaching people those kinds of things. And it's working. People are feeling much more empowered. Oh my gosh, I paid my rent on the 1st instead of the 18th. It's getting done. I don't have a late fee this time. So it's just showing folks responsibility in their housing. So they're not always coming back and saying, I can't pay my rent, or going to their municipal welfare, or coming to us and asking for that actual cash assistance. They're doing it.
So how many people do you typically serve in the course of a year?
Oh, thousands in all of the different programs. In terms of sheltering, though, because of the new way we're doing things, we have decreased by a good 50% of folks entering a shelter. We're still working with them. The need's still there, but they're not at the shelter. And that was our goal. Kids going into the shelter, they can't have their friends over. Everyone has to be in by 9 o'clock. It's hard. So if we can work with them the same way that we would have in the shelter in a different atmosphere, it seems to be better for everyone.
Now, I know one of the programs that you work with is Second Chance.
Yes.
And I don't know how much the community knows about Second Chance, but it's a really fascinating pilot that that a whole collaborative group took on here in the Monadnock region. Can you share a little bit about that program?
I sure can. Second Chance is a transitional housing program for folks leaving the Cheshire County Department of Corrections who otherwise would be homeless on the streets or entering our shelter. A few years back, we discovered that about 30% of the folks in our shelters were released from the correctional facility. And we thought, that's not going to help them. They could repeat the crime and end up back there. We wanted a special place that we could work with them a little bit differently than we do with the general folks. And it has seemed to work. It's a 6-unit building, 2 bedrooms in each unit. There's a lot of intense program counseling, things like that. And we've had, I think, 3 folks graduate out onto their own in their own permanent housing, doing a great job. We're in our 2nd year now. A few more will be graduating, and there's a waiting list to get in, believe it or not, but it seems to be working.
It's exciting to see that program because we actually had one of the folks that lived in Second Chance on the show. He was talking about his volunteer work that he had done out in the community, and but was also involved with the drug court, and he's getting ready he's graduated both out of Second Chance into permanent housing, and he's now graduating out of the drug court. So it's great to see something like that happen, especially when we think about a population who could end up back on the streets, and essentially a burden potentially for the taxpayers and people out in the community in the long term.
And that is true. Being at Second Chance or being in Second Chance costs about a fifth of what it would cost to be incarcerated. So for the community, it's a better option economically and emotionally. So.
And I'm sure physically for them, keeping warm through the winter and in a safe place. So tell us about some of the other options people have. You have the shelter, you have Second Chance, you have folks moving into apartments.
We have rapid rehousing program, which we provide rental assistance to folks. The goal is, if someone says, I am literally homeless, we get them into housing within a few days. We have some good relationships with landlords that have the ability to help us get folks into their units, and it's working. And then we work with folks while they're in their units and help make them self-sufficient, so that by between the 6th and the 12th month, they can afford their own rent, and then that frees up that voucher for the next person. We also have supportive services for veteran families. That we have that grant. We're in our second year of that. That's the SSVF program, which is mainly rapid rehousing. Any homeless veteran or veteran family that comes to us, we have the ability to rapidly rehouse them.
It's interesting to think about this in the context of the overall well-being for a person, because if you have housing, it may mean you have a job too, and you're able to go to work because you don't have the burden of trying to figure out, how do I live on the streets or in my car, and maintain a job. So it can make a real difference in terms of people's basic needs. Do you have a story about anyone that you've served that you'd like to share at all?
I do. I want to do this so that it's unidentifiable. We actually had a family living outside until about a month ago, a family with children in school. And when we discovered this, we acted on it right away. The person did have a criminal history, which made it difficult to find a landlord to accept them. We did find someone, and the family is housed now. The children are in school and are so happy they have their own rooms, and they didn't know it had been so long since they had been living indoors that they weren't quite sure how to do it, and that there are rules to live in a house, and my housing counselor helped them with a whiteboard and how to establish rules, and they are like the happiest family ever. We provided them with all the donations that we had that could help them furnish their home and whatnot, because they were living in a tent. And they are thriving right now. I think he'll be going to school to get a different trade skill, and they'll be fine.
It's amazing to see when the opportunity is provided for a person, how they'll embrace that and really move with that. And when I think about both children and adults, it just makes a whole difference in terms of their lifelong success for them. Exciting to hear a story like that. You mentioned that this family in particular received donations. How can people support housing stabilization services?
Well, you can definitely call our main number, which we will provide that information, and we take household goods of most types, beds that are in decent shape, bedding and bureaus and kitchen tables, items like that, washer machines, anything that we can help someone in their household so that they're not using their revenue at the time once we start getting them into housing. So all kinds of pots, pans, dishes, glasses. We've had some civic groups actually provide us with household good kits that we match when we rapidly rehouse someone. We can give them that kit, which is the broom, the dustpan, the glasses, the dish, silverware. That would cost a lot of money for someone to have to go and buy. So we like to provide that.
Now, I'm guessing that you probably collaborate very closely with other organizations out in the community. In fact, I know you do. Can you talk a little bit about some of those collaborations and how it creates that whole safety net for an individual who may come into housing stabilization services?
Well, we collaborate, obviously, with United Way. We collaborate with Monadnock Family Services for folks that would need their services. We collaborate with our Cheshire Medical Center for folks that would need medical care, home health care. If we find someone that needs those services, we collaborate with them and getting them into the home. Part of the thing is keeping people in their homes, and they help us help them stay in their homes. We collaborate with the municipalities. They'll call us when they feel that something is not quite right with a resident in their town. We collaborate with businesses such as banks. We have a local business that actually sponsors folks in our rapid rehousing program. It's a local grassroots kind of effort, and they'll do 6 months at a time. So there's it's a great community to work in. You can't beat it.
So can people from throughout the Monadnock region access their service, or is it limited to Cheshire County?
Nope. We serve the entire Monadnock region. We actually, with our veteran services, we were just Cheshire, Sullivan, Grafton, and Coos County. We just expanded that into the Western Hillsborough so we could cover all of the Monadnock region. And our homeless services also, although we say we're Cheshire and Sullivan counties, we cover the entire Monadnock region.
So if someone wanted to reach out for services, whether it's for, they may be an offender coming out of the correctional center, and I'm sure they're provided that information. But say someone is living on the streets right now, or perhaps living in their car, couch surfing. There's a number of things that can be happening that you don't have that stable housing. How would they contact you?
There are a couple different ways. They can call our main number, which is 352-7512, or they can call 211, and they can call 211 from anywhere in New Hampshire. 211 will then connect them with our outreach, our homeless outreach person, who then starts the ball rolling with the rapid rehousing and the counseling to get folks into housing. And if shelter is necessary, then that's the person that gets them to the shelter. But 211 or 352-7512.
Now, I know folks come into Southwestern Community Services through different avenues. Perhaps they need fuel assistance. They may be in housing that's located with you. If somebody wanted to access some of the services that you're providing, do they have to be in the housing stabilization program, or could other people contact you to just find out how to get connected into those services?
People could contact just to find out how to get connected. We will serve anyone. So
that whole budget counseling, anything like that, they can come in through any of those avenues within Southwestern.
Through any of the avenues, like we, as you know, have the program that we're just starting. Fuel assistance is referring folks for the financial literacy or financial coaching. We have folks that are living in our SCS housing that access the housing counseling, and we have folks that living in private rental units accessing that. We do feel that the program is growing, and we'll be out there a little bit more beginning of 2015.
So when you say we'll be out there a little bit more, does that mean people have to come to you, or that you'll be actually out doing outreach?
We'll be out doing outreach, and people can come to us. We'll be marketing it more so more people know about it. I know that there are some judges waiting for this to be out there so that the eviction process for them will have that extra step in it as well. So, but we have to wait till like January, capacity-wise. But there's a plan it's growing, so.
And it's why it's so important for folks to support organizations like Southwestern Community Services, Housing Stabilization, because the more donated goods you can receive. Can people volunteer?
People certainly can volunteer. If you have a skill, I know there's a lot of people out there that like to talk about money, and how to grow your assets and how to do all of that. So if you have a skill, please give us a call, and we can match you with folks.
So there's volunteer opportunities, there's opportunities to donate goods. Do you ever do any fundraising events?
We don't necessarily do the events. I think the last event that we did cost me more than we raised. I generally spend a lot of time writing grant proposals and bringing in money that otherwise would not come into the region. But if anybody wanted to help out with an event, I'd be happy to tag along with you.
So there's another volunteer opportunity if someone would really like to organize a fundraiser
Absolutely.
for housing stabilization services.
We'll take all the help we can get.
So that's all important. Anything you really want the public to know when they think about housing stabilization? Sometimes that can be looked at, and a person can be looked at and say they're living on the system. And is there anything you want the public to know about the folks that you're serving?
The folks that we're serving are your neighbors, they're your friends, they live in your community, and stabilized housing is the healthy way to be, and I think we want to be a healthy community, so that they're you and me.
And that's a really important message because we never know when it could be a you or me.
Exactly.
And you know, people I think always have to remember that. These are very challenging economic times we're living in. People are struggling with livable wages and making ends meet. So services like this are so critical. You know, we just had the elections. Not going to put you on the spot in terms of your voting or anything, but do want to ask, what's happening at a policy level around housing stabilization, both here in New Hampshire and locally?
Well, I don't foresee any major changes. I think what we're doing right now is what is going to be allowed to continue happening, and it is the right thing to do. For, at least for the next couple of years, I don't see anything major changing. I do know that HUD is not going to decrease what they're doing for homeless services. In that avenue, the other kind of HUD funding may change, but I do know that we're safe in our programs, and we'll be allowed to continue doing what we're doing, which is actually good work. So.
And I hope, public, that you really hear that, because one of the things we are seeing, HUD's got a lot of changes that'll be coming down the pike. I'm glad to hear they're not going to affect you. You know, whenever we have a change in leadership, whether it's at a state or a local level, it always has impact on the decisions that are made around different services that are available to people. Good to hear that that won't have any impact that you project right now for housing stabilization. Again, a safety net service, a basic need. We all need housing, food. You know, that shelter piece is just critical, and especially as we head into the winter months.
That is true.
You know, want to remind you, public, that you have an opportunity to support Southwestern Community Services Housing Stabilization Service through volunteering, through advocating, and through giving. You know, so really those three things around living united out there in our community. Great opportunity here, some super programs going on. Any last thoughts, Lori?
No, I thank you very much. I thank our community for all the support and the giving. There's a lot of giving in this community, you know, a lot of compassion. So thank you.
So we couldn't do it without you. We do want to thank you for the giving that you do provide, and encourage you to get out and to volunteer and to connect with Lori in the Housing Stabilization Services. What a great opportunity, what a great program in our community. If you have questions about this program, again, you can reach out to 211, and that number, they will refer you right to Southwestern Community Services. You can also look them up online at SCS Helps, I believe,
SCS,
.org.
yes.
And you can call them directly, and I believe that number is posted here on the screen for you. So you can reach right out. Lori Tyler, again, from Housing Stabilization Services. I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to remind you to give, to advocate, and to volunteer, to live united out there. Thank you.